Right. Well, welcome everyone to another live stream. So we are going to be meeting with Bud Financial today. This is a session on scaling with RAG and how GenAI powers real-time financial intelligence. Before we get into the content, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. So this session is being streamed across multiple platforms. It will be recorded. So if you come late, if you have to leave early, or if you just want to revisit some of the topics that we covered, this will be available as a recording soon after this session. Another thing is we will be doing Q&A at the end of the session. If you're on the SQL platform, you can use the Q&A tab to submit your questions, and we'll get to as many of them as we can at the end. Also, if you're watching on other platforms, just post your questions and we'll copy those over to Q&A. We'll get those answered as well. But let's get started with the content. Maybe with the next slide, let's just introduce our speakers. So my name is Greg Stacknick. I am a product manager at DataStax. I cover our AstraDB products, so our NoSQL Cassandra as a service. And I am joined today by Jakub Piotrowski. Jakub, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello, Greg. Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. And yes, my name is Jakub. I am VP of Product at BUD. So I take care of everything from strategy and thinking about what it is that we should be doing, all the way down to execution, working with potential existing clients and all those things in between. And also, of course, managing stakeholders internally, externally. It's really a fun job, and AI is making it even more interesting.
So for folks that aren't familiar with Bud, Bud is one of our premier reference customers. They have been they started with Cassandra self-managed. They've been using our AstraDB managed service for a number of years now. And so we wanted to invite Bud just to talk about kind of how their journey has been adopting AI, and especially the use cases that are relevant to fintech and financial services. So Jakub's going to just do a few different, some overview slides about Bud, what they do, but then we'll do a very demo-oriented session. So it should be pretty exciting.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, so just so everyone is a little more familiar with Bud, a few words about what it is that we're doing. So our core competence, maybe actually starting with, we are a B2B fintech, meaning that what we are doing is we are serving financial institutions. We are providing them with technology which is useful in a few different areas. But our core competency is making sense out of financial data with special focus on transactions. So what we do is we have built an infrastructure to work with transactional data that is coming from different sources, and we try to make sense of it using AI. I'm going to get to that in a few minutes. But what we're doing is then consumed by our clients who then are developing their own solutions on top of the data that we have. In some cases, they expose it directly to their customers. And we want to be that kind of B2B, or you can also call it kind of B2B2C provider in some cases, that is able to elevate how good they are understanding their own customers, so that ultimately those customers can make better financial decisions and are getting better service. Personally, I've been at BUD for almost 2 years. I have been competing with BUD before, so I have been doing actually fairly similar things at another fintech. And before that, I spent quite a lot of time working for banks. So I have been on the other side of the relation, where I have been buying services and products from companies like BUD or like other fintechs that specialize in providing tools for financial institutions in order to accelerate, in order to navigate around buy versus build and all those things. So I think what might be also useful in terms of context is just like providing a little bit of explanation, or a little more explanation into what it is that we actually do and how it works. The core part of what we're doing is product we call Enrich, which is capable of ingesting transactional data and then adding additional dimensions to this data. So what we are doing is we are categorizing transactions. So there is a category tree, there's a taxonomy that we are producing. We are trying to identify merchants. We are trying to identify transaction processors, we are trying to identify providers, we are trying to find location, and then we add more and more insights for a single transaction, starting with things like, is this recurring, is this subscription, maybe it is your salary, maybe it is a loan repayment, and so on. And then we gradually build better understanding of the customer as we are doing this. Now, the key element of this is we started as an open banking provider here in the UK. So we have started around the time when the open banking regulation was being kind of implemented, when all the banks were supposed to provide unified way of access to financial data for the customers. And that was born from the opportunity of being able to build good understanding of individual finances based on that, based on the fact that a third party could look at your finances and then just provide you insight into where the money is going, what are the trends, and so on. So, of course, the idea at the beginning, which is true for many B2B fintechs, was we actually wanted to be a B2C provider, and the first iteration of that was actually a consumer app. But what also happened is banks in the market spotted this as something that would actually make sense to be part of the digital channels offering. So we quickly pivoted into B2B because there was a market demand for that. But there is one important reason why I'm mentioning open banking. It's because open banking data, contrary to what probably even the regulators had in mind, is not terribly well structured. It's actually fairly complicated to deal with because everyone is providing slightly different format. What you are dealing with is limited to description that you get in the statement, which means that you have to have a pretty robust way of making sense of this data before you actually start using it anywhere. So, so what I'm presenting now, the kind of the diagram or the kind of the product landscape, the aggregated data is the first thing you see, and that's very important because starting with poor quality data forced us to build a very robust way of enriching it, of understanding it. And then of course, we have the ability of working directly with the banks, so what we call first-party data, so transactions that would be processed in the core banking platform of a bank or a credit union that we are working with. And then, of course, we can get additional data points that might be coming from credit bureaus, that might be coming from other financial providers. And which is the foundation of what we're doing then. So this is where the understanding of transaction is happening. We have few different ways of achieving this. Enrich is also, it's the foundation on which everything else is built, and the backbone of Enrich is actually powered by data stacks. So all the transactions that we are processing, they end up, with few exceptions, I'm going to get to that, but almost all of that ends in Astra, and this is where we then build like the next steps in terms of the actual products that we are delivering, although lots of our customers, they just use Enrich product and then they build on top of that themselves. The enrichment itself is AI driven, but it's multiple different models depending on what it is that you are trying to achieve. So there is, and this is also something that we are doing perhaps in a slightly different way than most of the other providers in the industry, because we have models that are separated from each other. So we don't do the thing that you, for example, look at a transaction at merchant, and then based on that you think, okay, this merchant is this category of transaction, and then follow up from there. We do this in separation because in our experience, this is very helpful when you're looking at the edge cases. So as an example, I could take any retailer and just look up in which industry they are, and I would have some indication of the category. But that approach would make me miss things like refunds, as an example, or things that would be the accurate way of classifying specific transaction. And if I were building incrementally on this information, I'd miss that. And I'm not going to go into more details, but the point is, it's fairly robust. It's been built on poor quality data, but it's still able to perform pretty well because of that, because this forced us to build very strong models that then are able to deal with different types of incoming data. So we have understanding of each transaction. That gives us understanding of the customer because, well, financial transactions, especially if you're looking at different sources, if you're looking at data that may be coming from multiple banks, are a pretty good way of describing the individual finances. So we know how each customer spends, how much money they make. Are they under financial stress? Are they living paycheck to paycheck? Do they have opportunities to save? Can they improve credit score? All those information, a lot of that can be based on the transactional data. So then we have the customer level insights, which then sort of fork into two key applications. So one is, of course, you want to tell it to your customers. So a lot of that is then powering the user experience in the bank, and this is where the Engage product comes to play. So this is basically your finance management tools that you'd have in your bank that would help you understand your transactions. I'm going to demo it in a second, but long story short, if there is something that would help you understand your finances, an insight, a trend, or maybe just a list of transactions, it's likely that we are able to power this and use the enriched data that we have to improve the quality of experience. But then the other aspect of this is those insights are also valuable for the bank. So here we have two products. One is a Drive, which is a consumer data platform which is offering insights across all portfolio of customers. So there might be trends in your populations or specific segments or things that might be happening that you'd like to be aware of, but also there might be opportunities that you might want to find. And finally, Assess is taking a view of the customer, but thinking about a single customer and trying to get an understanding of their affordability, try to understand how well they are doing in terms of specifically focusing on credit risk or kind of financial risk related to products that would be most of the time unsecured lending. So yeah, this is probably slightly longer than necessary explanation of what it is that we do, but again, it's all based on our ability to understand transactions. So Greg, I'm thinking that perhaps a good idea now would be to make it come alive and show a demo of how that looks. So let me stop sharing the slides. So there will be no more slides. But instead of that, I am going to start with, it's a feature of our Engage product that we call Intelligent Search. And I'm going to have it on the screen, but before I start using it, and hopefully this is big enough to be something that you can read. But before I go into this, a little bit around how we ended up with this. So as I've mentioned, we do process transactions, and for some of our customers, for some of our banking customers, all transactions that happen in their core banking platforms are sent to us. And in some cases, we persist them, and then they build their user experience on top of that. In some cases, we send it back so they can deal with it the way they want. But for the customers that decide to persist it with us, then they can build the user experience or the customer-facing features directly using our API or using our widgets. So what you're looking at is actually, it's the widget-based approach. So we have a portfolio of widgets that surface those different features like budgeting, like it might be just trends, analytics, saving goals, all those things. But one of the things that we've been experimenting with was providing a chatbot. I mean, ChatGPT hits the market. Every single executive at the bank is thinking of, yes, we should have a chatbot. This is the future. That's how we should think in terms of interaction with our customers. So there was a spike of interest in this, and we saw it, and we decided that, well, it would be obvious to build a chatbot that talks about finances. We've built it, and we actually went through multiple proof of concept exercises with major financial institutions, and it all ended in a disappointment because, frankly speaking, the industry is not ready for generative AI experience where there is a chatbot that you can freely speak about your finances, because there is still a little too much risk in terms of how much appetite major financial institutions are. And also there is quite a lot of things that you can achieve with a decent but not generative chatbot. But combining those two things, it's not trivial. So we have the technology to provide that experience, but no one is buying. But it's very good at understanding your finances. So we started experimenting with how can we limit it a bit. So intelligent search is that. So intelligent search is basically combining your just decent banking search experience with generative AI, but in a way that is safe. So what is happening here? And I'm going to ask it a question, which is, what is my coffee spend? And what I expect is, well, I got a list of coffee transactions, but also what is happening is I got this nice summary. So what is happening is we basically have the ability to use generative AI that then is able to write queries or understand transactions and then summarize it as a part of the search experience. Because when you're looking at how you're interacting with anything that is providing you search experience, a lot of the times you're not really after the thing you're asking for. So you're not necessarily after the keyword. You're just trying to get better understanding of what is happening in that kind of broader area. So in this case, I mean, it was an obvious ask because I did actually ask the question, but I could also just type in coffee. Actually, I'm going to click coffee because it is suggesting me this as a category, and I get slightly more kind of summary in terms of, so it's not only the transactions that you get, but of course you get an accurate list of transactions, but you also get this nice summary of what has been happening in that, well, in this case, in that specific category. But this gets better because this also has the ability to do a bit of semantic matching. So then when I ask for car, it knows that it's not about finding the keyword car, although it would list transactions that match it, but it's about all the expenses that would fall into this category. And we actually don't have a car as a category in our taxonomy. So the underlying engine is smart enough to understand that there are multiple things that are somewhat adjacent to the car, which might be fuel spending, which might be car payments, which might be insurance, and so on. So, so what we are trying to achieve here is you're trying to think of what is the context that makes sense given the keyword, and this is something which is achieved with the use of generative AI. Now, I've mentioned the poor experience with launching generative AI with banks. The big advantage that this has is the summary here is still based on transactions. So it's still based on a query of the data which belongs to that specific customer, which means that the way the LangChain works here means that it will not hallucinate. It will always give you the answer based on the data. It might build a query which is not necessarily accurate, but it will not provide you with something which is completely wrong, which means that the level of safety or the level of predictability is much higher compared to a chat when you have a long conversation that can go in different directions. So the fact that this is limited to like a single prompt type of approach, but also it's always answering based on the data, makes it into something which actually financial institutions are happy to adopt. We actually, 2 hours ago, we've released press release with the first US customers that is launching this feature, which is it's fruition. It's another fintech which is working in the finance management space, but is also providing solutions for businesses that want to improve finances of their employees, and they will be actually adopting intelligent search as a part of the product suite. So this is something that is on the right side of the question whether it's time, whether we're ready to deploy it, whether it's something that we could go with a kind of broad audience based on generative AI. But there is one more thing that I wanted to kind of highlight here, which is, so of course, the context is great for searching, but also the context is super important for the financial institution itself. So as you see, I've asked about loans, and I got a summary here. But also I got this, we call it promotional insights. So the engine has the ability to look at a list of topics that the bank is interested in talking about. And a lot of the time that would be offers, or a lot of the time that might be even things that are related to kind of financial awareness and so on. And if it believes that this is something related to what we are searching for, it's going to display it as like another thing. Now, this is very useful because one of the big challenges that people that are in charge of communication at financial institutions have is finding the right moment to communicate something which is relevant. Of course, like the challenge before that is trying to get to the point where we have something personalized to say, but once you have it, that still doesn't fully solve the problem on how to deliver it, on when is the right time to talk about this. And if I'm searching for loans in the digital channels of my bank, that's very obviously a good idea to talk about this. Now, again, I've used the keyword loan, which is something that probably a decent marketing engine should pick up. But that might not be so obvious, but still we are looking at this from a semantic perspective. We're also looking at this from the point of view of all those transactions that have all those additional dimensions we've added, and then we are serving it as something that we think makes sense in the context of what the customer is searching for. So that's intelligent search. It's like the way to look at this is basically it's decent search experience combined with the ability to provide a little generative AI-powered summaries. Doesn't always generate something. Like in this case, it decided that probably Starb is not 100% certain if it's going to be Starbucks, so just decided to list transactions. But again, it's how it responds to how you're engaging with this and the engine making decisions on what is going to be relevant and what to display as you go. All powered by Astro. So unless you stop me, I'll keep doing this because I have one more that I wanted to share with you, which is I've mentioned the tool for employees, Drive, which also has it has a proper generative AI interface, which we are very happy with, and I can talk about this a bit more. And in order to do that, I have another screen to share. Let me just size it the way that will make it useful. Yeah, I think that should work, but you have to tell me if it is too small. Yeah, I think that should be okay. So, basically, this is a product that is looking at data of all customers. So all those transactions with additional dimensions, with categories, with merchants, and so on. But now they are consolidated in one place. And you can, like, financial institutions are doing this. There is nothing new about the idea of just trying to look at the data of your customers. But most of the time when it's being done, it has a form of a project where you hire lots of seats in Tableau, and then you hire lots of consultants to create dashboards for you, and then you end up having them on permanent basis because you keep having questions around the data that you see. So what we've done is we decided to emulate this whole experience. So basically build a platform which is dedicated for financial services, which is self-generating data, and it's providing value from day one, and it is building on top of the data that we're already processing. So lots of our existing customers are picking up Drive as a next thing because it's a logical continuation. So if you are providing better digital experience for your customers using Engage or Search or just Enrich, this gives you insights into who your customers are, and it's just reusing the data that we already processed, which means that you're looking at it and maintain consistency and so on. The same applies also to like all the risk-related scenarios. And so what we have here is it's a set of dashboards that we have pre-configured. I did click on this, or didn't I? Which are providing insights based on transactions. Yes, okay, finally. As you see, it takes a little bit of time to respond, but that's perfectly fine. Because what you're getting is a lot of information about your customer base. So what you're getting is, so not only the kind of the spend data in a sense, categories and merchants, but we're also looking at things like income, savings. We're looking at trends over time. We are looking at competitors. We're looking at how your customers are banking with other financial institutions, which is very useful. But then, of course, you can get that in any kind of BI tool. So what we are trying to do here to make it a bit more specific to the financial industry is we're also trying to look at things like, as an example, AI highlights. So we have a feature that is looking at the data that you're looking at, but instead of you having to go through all those charts, which again, power users find very useful, but you also have this instantly readable, instant to understand nuggets of information, which might just give you a summary of what is happening with your customers, what are the trends, what are the things that stand out. And if I filter, because I have all the filters here, so for example, we're going to talk about coffee, let's limit it to coffee. Then once I get the results, I can regenerate this and I can see how the population is doing in terms of that specific aspect. So in this case, I'm just getting a summary of who are the big merchants, or maybe what are the trends, or what are the characteristics of the transactions, as in terms of regularity in this specific case. But so this is an application of AI which is fairly obvious. Another application which is also fairly obvious, but we actually find our customers use it quite a lot, is the ability to provide generative AI interface. So we've built a chatbot, which we named Copilot in a hope that that's going to be a generic name. Microsoft probably is not necessarily fully agreeing with that. We might rebrand it for that purpose, but for now it's Drive Copilot. And what it is, it's a chatbot that has full understanding of the data that sits in Drive and allows you to ask any questions that you want. And actually, I have a couple of questions that I've prepared. Instead of you having to look at the typing, I'm just going to paste them here. So of course, it can build queries. So if you know what is the data that you're looking after, if you're trying to find people that would have one credit card and high spend on buy now, pay later, and so on, you can use it just to build the query for you and produce results instantly. But you can also ask it questions that are a bit more open. In this case, I wanted to find customers that I'd like to target with my new rewards credit card, and this is what I'd like to do. So it is asking me what kind of customer I'd be targeting, which is a kind of nice way of following with the conversation. And my idea is that I would like to look at people that have high non-essential spend and relatively high income. So what it does, it is able to translate this into what it means in terms of financial data that it has. So in some cases, it would have information on spending. In some cases, it would have the ability to look at things like income stability and so on. But in some cases, it would have to figure out what is essential and non-essential spending. So the way it works, it always reads back to me what it's going to do. So there's actually quite a complicated lang chain underneath it, which is responsible for like multiple steps, query generation, and so on. But also, it will always provide the what it's going to do back to me so I can correct it. And also it gives me the ability to take a look at the query, which is built. Most of people don't really use the view query option. We've added it because we thought that it's going to provide a bit more assurance in terms of users being confident in using this feature, because you know exactly what's going to happen. But actually, it's not that essential. But what is going to happen when I run the queries, I'm going to get a list of customers that fit this criteria. I can, of course, keep having this conversation. In this case, maybe the ratio is fairly low, so I'm going to ask it, can you change the non-essential spend to income ratio to, let's say, 60%, which it should be able to do. And when I get the result, which is not what I expected, but actually this is a live product, and I should be able to go back to that chat. It was this. What I'm going to get, what I should get to is, it should refine the query based on the feedback that I have provided. I'm not going to attempt doing that again, but what it offers me is the ability to save that as a segment. So, and segment is the essential part of the product, because this is how ultimately you'll be thinking about your audience. how you'll be thinking about the customers that you have. Now, so one additional thing that we have in the product then is we are also generating quite a lot of characteristics for customers. So I have the ability to build segments based on employment status. I can look at things like lifestyle. I can look at things like relations with competitors. And all I have to do is just I have to click on a block that I like, and it's going to result in a segment being created for me, and I can keep refining this. And then as a result, I'm going to have a group of customers that then I can just track their behavior. I can interface this with the CRM system, but I can just also just save it and go back to this in the future, or get notified about changes in terms of number of people in the segment, and so all that is dynamic. But the key part of this is, so far everything here is fairly manual, in a sense that I still have to do lots of things, and I have to do a lot of thinking myself. But the thing that we've added to it is actually a bit of automation around this. So what is happening in the background? We also have a couple of models that are looking at all the metrics that are coming in, and those models also have a brief of what the organization is, and also what are the business objectives. So all those steps and all the data that we have is then being processed by models that then are able to translate the data that we see, or trends in the data, into what we think would be interesting segments or interesting marketing targets, or maybe risk segments that should be flagged to the user without any manual intervention. And this is where we are moving towards a bit more kind of autonomous applications of AI, because of course, up till this point, the data has been enriched with AI. Copilot is obviously using generative AI, but it still requires fair amount of work from the user, and you still need to you need to know what you're looking for. You can of course explore all you want, and it's much faster than previously, when you typically would have to have data analysts involved, and you have to pre-process the data and so on. But fundamentally, it doesn't really change the workflow. So what we are looking to do with this is move towards a bit more autonomous operations. So because we have all this data, like we not only have the transactions, but we also know who the client is, and the client also know what it is that they are trying to achieve. So so we can just generate suggestions or recommendations for segments that would make sense. And in this case, I mean, looking at people with high essential spending that also have a lot of lazy cash. I mean, this is like trying to engage with them is a great way to increase deposits, but also it's a potentially great target to look at when it comes to selling savings or investment products. But increasing deposits is actually one of the key objectives for many of our clients, so we focused on that. So with Drive, what we are trying to do is we are trying to get to the point where a lot more data processing and decision making is becoming automated, to the point that that's no longer the bottleneck, or it's not the part of the process that is preventing our clients from ultimately being successful, and also like having the best possible understanding of their customers. I think that's all I had in terms of demoing. But yeah, this is looking at the transactional data from two very different angles. So the first part, the intelligent search, is trying to think of how we can bring a bit more AI into like everyday interactions for individual customer, while Drive is how we can use that data and automate a bit more for the employee of the bank, or for the employee at the contact center or branch as well, because this also has the ability of surfacing insight for individual customer. So when you are preparing for a conversation with the customer, you have someone on call, you can not only tell them about transactions that they've made if there is any dispute, but you can also actually talk about trends in their finances and what you think might make sense for them, which is still a thing. I mean, that's humans still prefer to talk about major financial decisions with another human, and so this is also something I want to support. But of course, how much effort you want to put on this, or how much comprehension you need to get before having a conversation with the customer, this is something that can be improved quite a lot.
Wow, that was great. Love all the demos. Thank you so much, Piotr. Sorry, Jakub, for taking us through this. We have quite a few questions from folks as they've been watching. Do we want to switch to the Q&A tab and kind of just go through some of these?
Yeah, I'm happy to do so.
Cool. So I see one of the first.
Yeah, so the first question is, please elaborate on how you used RAG and what is different compared to the state of the art. So, so we have few different ways of providing RAG. I think that where we probably are doing best is it's really about the quality of the data that goes into it, because it's like the key part of all those products that are built on top of the Enrich platform is the data that we are retrieving, or the context that we're building, that needs to be of the highest possible quality, because otherwise you are introducing noise, which actually very quickly is going to result in conversations going the wrong way. So just to give you an example, if you are getting your salary every 2 weeks, and then if you get an incoming loan, and if that loan is, let's say, the amount of like 2 salaries, then if you don't understand that this is an incoming loan, you might all of a sudden build a very different picture of the customer, because if someone is living paycheck to paycheck, 2 extra paychecks make a big difference in terms of affordability, in terms of risk. So whenever we are deploying generative AI, we need to make sure that the data that comes into it is as good as possible. And really, that is an area where it's not only as good as possible, probably what is even worse is having false positives. So that's absolutely key enabler for us. Like, none of what we're doing would really work if we are not able to build that decent foundation.
There's a similar earlier question also about just like reducing hallucinations,
Yes.
which is always kind of a challenge with RAG, right? And so, typically what we've seen with a lot of customers when they're just doing like straight RAG, just embedding their data and then just running that through an LLM, like their relevancy is like under 80%, but then they need to do more techniques, maybe around chunking or metadata or hybrid search or things like that, to kind of get to higher levels. Do you want to talk about some of the things that?
Yes, absolutely. So we, I mean, where we are right now, and I think like what kind of the best practice is, of course, it's best to provide guardrails that maximize the likelihood of getting the desired outcome. Now, for us, hallucination is a very adjacent challenge to just the overall requirement of financial institutions to provide something which is predictable and explainable, which it's not always super easy. So when we are thinking about avoiding hallucinations, one of the things that, aside from having good data and aside to trying to build like the lang chains in a way that they always go back to the query which is executed against the data that is of good quality, we also have seen that providing a lot of examples of how to, especially when it comes to query building, which surprisingly is a fairly fragile area, especially if you start with like fairly broad kind of business objective, like business prompt, and you want to translate it into data that doesn't necessarily match it in an obvious way. We maintain a quite a big portfolio of examples that help, even if they are not dealing with the specific like exact request that are being asked. We do find that being able to emulate what they, and it's not even like how users are asking, but more what it is that you're interested in, helps quite a lot. And just to give you an example, which is actually that has been a painful process, is time. Now, we found that when we are trying to retrieve data and when we have to deal with time in a specific way, so as an example, something happened in March and then something else happened in April and then something else happened in May, it is massively increasing number of different variations that you can have. And then occasionally you'd have a client that they think about time as kind of 4-week increments instead of calendar months. So this is something that it's best dealt with by just having examples, but that is a bit of dialogue with users. Now, interestingly, especially in Drive, we've also noticed that users are actually pretty good at learning how to talk to the product, which actually got us to the point where we've seen people having like cheat sheets that they created themselves on like what gets them to the right result. Now, I'm not proud of it because the whole idea with Drive was it's accessible for everyone working at the organization. And when we actually examined those cheat sheets, turned out that people are just thinking about certain standardized definitions. To give you a simple example, it would be affluent customer. Like, how do you define this? It's something that you'd probably prefer to have like a standard across the organization. So this is what led us to basically extend the table with customers with flags that respond to those commonly used characteristics. So then when you ask Copilot about affluent customers, it doesn't have to think of, okay, what an affluent customer is. It will not ask you to define it. It will just see if there is an answer to this that has been preset, because actually this is what you're after. So all those cheat sheets, a lot of the time are just leading towards standardization, because you just try to get reputable result. But ultimately, it's an ongoing challenge. Like, side note on hallucinations is, so we, in our LangChains, we are using foundation models as well. We are using them for summarization. We are using them to help with building queries and so on. And we tend to use few of those. So like single LangChain might involve us using Gemini and one of the OpenAI's models as an example, depending on like which one is like has been selected for the specific job. Changes of versions of those have also, like we've seen, have actually surprising impact, because they might get better at comprehension and general knowledge, but they also change occasionally the way, like I like to think about this as almost like change of personality, and that actually has a knock-on effect on the chain. So this is, we don't have a great solution to hallucination other than just try to think of where that might happen, where it might affect us, and what is the answer to the specific problem you're trying to solve, rather than have like a universal approach. It's listening to feedback and also testing yourself as much as possible.
I'm going to ask so this wasn't asked in Q&A, but that's you brought up a good point. So, you're using foundation models, and you might get different results between different versions of, say, Gemini or Llama 3 or whatever. What kind of automation or what kind of observability have you built in so that you can track like whether it's worth it to upgrade from one version to another, things like that?
So we are trying to, so especially when it comes to generative AI, we have environment which is stable, which we can always go back to like a certain recent point and have conversations that are kind of changing the data, and we just run this, going through conversations that so basically all the conversations that are happening, we are logging them, and we're also logging the output, and we are looking at whether it has changed. And we have, like, when we are looking at this, we have certain tolerance for differences. So it's not like the expectation is that like actually it would fail if you are expecting the exact same answer, but it's more, this is what I want to get. Is the number of customers in the resulting segment the same? So it's not necessarily about how you got there, but it's more about like, is the kind of the actual data result kind of adding up? This tends to work, but also, like, to be very honest, we're trying to avoid changing the models as much as possible, because we are not. So we are not in a position to benefit a lot from moving from one major version to another version. So we try to stick to those that have fairly long kind of time ahead of them before they're going to be decommissioned, so that we don't necessarily have to worry about that. It's a bit different with our internal models, because there we basically observe how, because those models are primarily used for classifying, for enriching the data. So there it's more a question of how much the data has changed, and it's new merchants, it's new spending patterns, it's new transaction processes that start to generate tokens that we haven't seen, and so on. And we try to accumulate certain number of new things before we just do retrain, rather than kind of do this in kind of any kind of continuous way. We do have tricks, like of course we have rules. So some things would just have to be overriding whatever the model is saying. But again, it's a question of what gets the job done.
There's another follow-up question about kind of the model usage. Is that they're asking, do you fine-tune your LLM models or just use standard base models? You just
We
said
do both.
you're making your own as well. So
yeah, so we have, so for things that are related to broadly understood data processing, so looking at incompetence, looking at categorization, and so on, we have our own fine-tuned models. For things like query building, like providing summaries, we tend to use just off-the-shelf foundation models, because they're just better at this, and also it's a bit of commodity in a sense that doesn't, like, it's easy to switch, and it doesn't necessarily matter that much to the final result, while getting good quality of input data matters a lot.
That's great. I mean, we're starting to run out of time, but there is a question here I think was probably in a lot of people's minds around security and data privacy.
Yes, data privacy is, I mean, so we're working with banks, and some of our clients are, I mean, I would say that they are, like, probably saying obsessed about privacy is not the right word, but it's a very, they wouldn't do something when they are not happy with it. So what we are doing is, depending on which product you're looking at, we would either process it in a way that we don't have access to data, so the thing that we are seeing is embeddings and tokens, but we don't even know the identity of the customer, and we would have a key management solution that would be, in some cases, even like fully managed by the customer. So we can't see anything beyond that. For Drive, which, like, it by definition is looking at customers and, like, across all customers, the privacy tends to be a bit more about what goes outside of the organization. And here, basically what we ensure is the foundation model. So the components that we do not control don't see the data. So they never know about the customer. They never know about like the financial patterns. They are there only to be kind of like a technical support, in a sense that preparing a query and things like that, rather than actually getting access to any information that would be sensitive. But of course, there is, it all depends on what is the application you're after, because in some cases, especially if you're looking at, let's say, collections, and you're looking at the individual customer, ultimately it's a tool that's going to surface that, and you have to know the specific customer. So that's this is where you have to have all this information in one place, but it's layered in a way that, depending on the application, we're able to provide the privacy that is matching the expectation of the client.
That's great. That's great. It's kind of a funny question. Someone's asking, your demo was very, very fast. Were you doing it? Was it a local demo, or was this?
No, it's a real product. It's fast. It's fast because so this is so I did run through those things before, and there's a bit of caching going on, which is actually a bit of like Astro Magic thing. There is a bit of unpredictability around how fast it will be, but we intentionally, especially with intelligent search, we do have two endpoints underneath. One is the fast one, which is the keyword one, which just goes, it's optimized to go to the database, extract the data, and the other one is the slow one, which has the whole long chain and is like selecting the data, that would be suitable and dimensions that would make sense and provides the summary and so on. So we kind of do separate those two things. But yeah, I mean, it kind of should be like that. And even Drive, which we have customers that have millions of end users, it tends to be fairly fast. We are trying to make sure that it's never boring, as in we're trying to ensure that we don't have any kind of dashboards, any queries that would make you start doing something else. So yes, sometimes it would be like if I want to see all transactions and all categories of all customers of all time, it might be 15 seconds, 20 seconds type of thing. But if it's more, then we don't want it. Like then we're doing something wrong. We have to kind of optimize.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's a question specifically from the first demo, so the client-facing mobile app demo. They're asking, why do we see student loan choice when you type loan? Is it because is the user a student and it knows the context of the end user?
Yes. So basically, a student loan repayment is a transaction that was there, and the engine probably has. We have a category which is student loan, but it's the kind of the loan part which is important there.
Cool. And I think maybe one more. We'll do one more. This might be a long one. Let's see. Can you explain more about how you did how you optimized the chat completion API speeds while having a complex workflow?
So this is where I am VP of product, but this is one of those things when I'm looking at my engineers and my role is limited to, I think this should be faster.
Yeah.
So I don't think that I would do justice to this question by trying to answer it. Other than there has been and kind of still are kind of like lots of tricks being put in place. And tricks is probably like not doing justice to it as well. There has been quite a lot of work on the LangChain on trying to understand what is useful context, what is something that we can deal without maybe going to the foundation model, what things can be done based on past results and so on. So there's quite a lot of that in play, because we ultimately, I would like to see intelligent search as you go to your bank and you see your list of transactions and it's there. So this is like one of those few cases where we actually, not going to say we gold-plated for performance, but that has been key because this is something that it's new. It's not new. Your bank is giving you a list of transactions, which means that there is a solution to beat. So we did focus quite a lot on making sure that this is as good or better for searching, but also has the extra intelligence.
Great. Cool.
But I know it's a non-answer, so.
Yes, yeah, totally understand. Well, I think that kind of gets us to the end of all the questions. There was one about, can the source data be transactional from an ERP? I think these techniques, what you guys have built is specific for financial services, but I'm sure this is applicable.
It could be, yes. It's most of the things that we're doing are tailored more towards like retail customer, like retail banking, individual bank. But we do have some banks that are using this also for their business customers. And ERP data, like fundamentally, it's not much different in the sense that it's an item with a description, it has an amount.
Cool. Well, yeah, thank you so much for your time. This is a great session. Love that we were able to see so many demos because it just makes it more real for users to see kind of how this is GenAI is enhancing the financial user experience in reality. So that was awesome.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you very much for having me. Yes, I think that it's a very exciting space. I feel that we are ahead of what our clients want. It's okay. Again, occasionally I question myself, like, does it really make sense? Like, where is the market fit? If the market fit is next year or in 2 years, is it really like the best thing that we should be doing? But it feels like it's coming together as like a kind of like end-to-end platform.
Yeah, that's great. Cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining. We will have this available as a replay and we will share out the slides at the end of the session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.